All right, welcome back. In this video, we're now going to go over the main charging technique. So this is pretty much what the whole book has been about up till now. So the main goal of the book is to teach you how to control your subconscious, right? Now your subconscious, like I said in chapter 1, follows a charging paradigm. So it doesn't have a free will paradigm. So everything you want the subconscious to do requires you to charge it, right? To charge it to do that thing, right? So this is pretty much what you're mainly going to be doing to control your subconscious or to charge it. Now, this is probably not going to be that hard to do, or it's not that big a deal now, because we spoke about everything already, right? So, so this shouldn't be too bad. But we basically talked a little bit about the process, in chapter 8, right? So at that time, I said to hold an intention for about 7 to 10 seconds until you enter a transcendental state, and just keep repeating that process. Hold the intention to feel some emotion, right? Well, now we're going to actually look at the more complete version of that, right? So that was basically just a kind of simple technique to get you started, and hopefully you've been practicing that. But now we're going to look at the more complete technique, which is really, just to go over this point here, the more complete technique is basically involves doing two things at once, right? So the key to main charging, or the key to the main charging technique, is to both hold an intention for about 7 to 10 seconds and do that while you're also telling a story, right? So that's important. So you actually want to pretty much start the same way. Hold an intention to feel some emotion for about 7 to 10 seconds. But this time you want to kind of do it while telling a story in your mind at the same time, right? So it's basically similar to, when you're walking, but you're also kind of focusing on something at the same time. Sometimes it's kind of hard to do two things at once, but this is kind of what you want to do. You want to just try to do both. So some of your attention, right? Your intention. We'll talk more about the role attention plays in this process in chapter 12, so the next chapter. But for now, your attention will be split between those two processes. So part of your attention will be kept on holding the intention, and another part of your attention will be directed toward telling a story in your mind. And so, I don't know, I think I might have mentioned in chapter 7, but you can produce an intention to do multiple things at once. It can have multiple commands, right? And so, in this case, we've been mostly just talking about intention in terms of like a single command with a single subject, but it can have multiple subjects and multiple commands. So this is one circumstance where you would actually have two commands, right? Which would be to holding the intention to feel some emotion, or the command to feel some emotion, which is a desire type command, and you would be telling a story, right? So that's pretty much it. You want to try to do both things at the same time. Now, while you're holding an intention to feel more emotion and telling some story of some kind at the same time, eventually, after about 7 to 10 seconds, you're going to enter a transcendental state. Now, when that happens, you want to stop holding the intention. It's not really that important to stop holding it, but you just don't really want to focus on it that much anymore. Because remember what we said, there's a loss of syncopation between what your intention is doing and what your subconscious mind is doing. So at that point, when you're entering a transcendental state, holding it or not holding it is really not too important. But you want to stop holding the intention when you feel your awareness entering a transcendental state, and then you want to acquiesce to the urge to drift into a daydream or a transcendental state. So basically, when you're holding that intention and to feel some emotion, and you're telling some story in your mind, right? Now, just to kind of, before I go forward, just to kind of basically review a tiny bit here, what I was saying last video. So remember what I said, every frequency or every subconscious frequency has some kind of story that it favors, right? So when you're doing all of this, when you're telling a story in your mind, you obviously want to tell some story that favors the frequency you're trying to charge. And like I said before, each frequency has a learning curve. So that'll take some practice to know what type of story keeps your subconscious around the frequency you want to charge. Right? But when you feel your mind entering a transcendental state, as you're telling that story and holding that intention, you want to acquiesce to the urge. So what you're going to feel is pretty much what I said in chapter 8, right? You're going to feel your mind starting to drift, right? And it's going to start almost trying to enter a daydream while you're telling the story. Now, that point is very important because there's a timing component to it. So what acquiesce means, basically, it just means allow your mind to drift. Stop holding the intention. Stop focusing on kind of controlling everything in a kind of normal state of awareness, which is what you would normally do in a normal state of awareness, and kind of just let your mind drift off into a kind of daydream-like state, but let it do that while you're telling the story, or while you were telling the story. And at that point, when you do enter a transcendental state in a daydream, which is basically it's like a daydream type state, now you want to switch. So that switching factor is very important, because I don't think I mentioned that before. You want to switch from using your negative mind, or kind of doing everything using your intention, and you now want to switch to trying to continue to tell the story using your instinct, right? So that's very important. This, like I said before, this is kind of a difficult, probably the hardest part for me to explain, which is why I was saying practice with what I was telling you to do in chapter 8. Because, like I said before in chapter 1, intention alone does not control your subconscious, right? It only quantizes it. You have to actually control your subconscious using that part of your mind, right, which is different from your intention. The place in your mind where your intention is produced is different from the place in your mind where subconscious action is expressed, or subconscious instinct is expressed, right? It's basically a less consciously aware. I don't think it has any awareness, actually. Your conscious mind has the awareness. But it kind of has this, no, I don't know if that's fair to say. It probably has its own degree of awareness, right? But it's just not aware in terms of reality. It's aware in terms of what it chooses to think, right? What your subconscious mind chooses to think. And like I said before, it's not some artificial intelligence or some automatic program you have no control over. No, that's actually you doing stuff, right? It's just a different part of you doing stuff, and you're controlling it on a different level. Now, because your conscious mind can never be turned off, you're always producing conscious thought at the same time you're producing subconscious thought. So at some point, you probably assume it's your conscious mind doing everything, because your conscious mind has more control. It feels safer to do stuff with your conscious mind because you have more control with it. But you have to kind of get yourself out of that way of thinking. It took me a long time to get used to it, right? For years I've been practicing this, and for years I kept trying to do everything with my conscious mind, right? Even though I knew my subconscious was charging, eventually I learned it was charging and what it was doing and all that, but I still kept trying to control it solely with my conscious mind, and that didn't work very well, right? So you have to get used to sort of finding that place in your mind and doing stuff with that place in your mind instead of the place in your mind that produces conscious thought. And like I said, that place in your mind that expresses subconscious thought feels like a form of instinct, or it's occurring on a level of awareness that you would call instinct, right? So on a level of awareness where you're using instinct, everything has that just do it feel to it, right? It's not premeditated thought. It's not planned out. You're not thinking of things in the past or in the future. You're just doing it. So when you produce an emotion, you just do it. You know what I mean? You don't think about it. You don't calculate it. Even a baby does it, right? So you don't have to teach a baby, this is how you laugh, right? They just laugh. You just do it, right? That's how instinct is expressed, or that's how subconscious thought expresses itself. That's how every thought at a subconscious level feels. It feels like it has a very just do it feeling to it. And so when you enter a transcendental state, your goal is to try to continue telling that story using the instinct part of your awareness or your subconscious mind. And you're just going to start doing stuff in your daydream, in this daydream state, using your instinct. And you're going to notice that same part of your mind can just produce more emotion. It just does it, right? Once you get the hang of kind of controlling it. But the emotion you can produce, the ways you control the daydream, the beliefs you have, everything's all going to be based around the intention you hold because it's quantized, right? So that part is probably the trickiest part to do, but it takes a little practice. But yeah, you would basically just keep practicing that. Actually, we kind of already went over this next point. So continue to tell the story using subconscious instinct as opposed to just intention, right? And then the key to charging using this technique is just to repeat the process, right? So when your mind will stay in a transcendental state for a couple seconds, right? So if you do it successfully, you're going to continue to kind of play out the story using your subconscious instinct. And just to go over another point, like I said before, the conscious mind can think, it's almost, if I had to describe it almost geometrically, right? The conscious mind can think in right angles. So it can accelerate and decelerate and sort of change directions very easily and sharply, right? Because you have so much control. The subconscious mind doesn't do that. It's like it moves in curves, right? So if you try, when you're enter a transcendental state, right? It's tricky to get used to doing things with the instinct part of your mind, the just do it part of your mind, right? So you may get tempted, and I actually think I mentioned that here, but you may be tempted to kind of use your negative mind because it feels like it has more control. If you try to forcefully control that daydream-like state too much, you're just going to fall back into a negative mind state because that's the type of control you're expressing, right? So your brain just helps you do that. Subconscious instinct is not controlled like that. It's quantized. It does not have free will. You do have some ability to control it after quantization, but everything feels a little bit curved. I don't know. It's like I think when you do it, you'll kind of get a sense of what I'm talking about. It feels more curvier. You can't change it quite as instantaneously. You have to change it more delicately. Otherwise, you'll just get knocked out of the transcendental state if you try to force change too much, right? So you got to do it like more, and you've probably noticed this when you're in a dream. So if you've ever been in a dream, which is just a really deep transcendental state, and let's say you even become lucid in a dream, right? So you're aware it's a dream. If you try to force things too much in a dream, you just wake up, right? Because your brain is responding to the negative mind expression, right? That basically comes from your ground state. So when a part of this is my theory anyway, when a part of your brain, when you try to control your conscious mind, in the normal negative mind way, or with negative mind properties of rationality, a part of your brain sort of lights up, and then it sends a command to your ground state to help you express control of your conscious mind in the way that you're trying to, which is with the negative mind properties, like I said, which includes less rationality. And so expressing that's the intention to express that kind of control causes your brain to just sort of pull your subconscious back to its ground state. So you don't really want to do that when you're in a transcendental state with this process. You want to try to keep everything a little bit more curvier, or try to change things in a less quick fashion because that suppresses that pullback function of your brain. And so you're able to stay in a transcendental state a little, it's still only a few seconds, but you're able to stay in it a little longer and control it better. So that takes a little practice. If you keep practicing it, like trying to control your emotions and what's going on in your daydream, using that place in your mind that I've been calling instinct, once you get the hang of it, you're then going to start to be able to easily see where your conscious mind begins and where the conscious mind ends and the subconscious mind begins. And then you're going to get used to controlling your subconscious when you enter a transcendental state. You can technically control the subconscious, even when your subconscious is in the ground state. Like I've done it before. It's not quite as fluid as it is when you're in a transcendental state, but you can do that if your subconscious is really volatile. And if your mood is very, very strong. So you basically deep charge, which we're going to talk about, I think in the video after this one. But yeah, if there's a lot of charge in your short-term memory, your subconscious is very volatile to some frequency, and you can actually still control it a little bit in the ground state. But theoretically, we really want to focus on what it means to control it in the transcendental state, because that's where you would charge it. But like I said, when you fall out of a transcendental state after a few seconds, you would hold an intention, focus on, hold an intention to feel some emotion again, keep telling your story. Like I said before, you would generally tell the story in a way that loops around. Because when you keep practicing this process, right, your goal is to tell your story in a way that keeps your emotions right around the same frequency, right? Or feeling relatively the same emotion. And you're going to know this. To pull this off, you have to kind of keep looping your story, right? And then it stays right around the same frequency. And then as you keep repeating the process, it charges at that frequency. And then, of course, like I said in the last video, you want to be aware of what subject is carrying the charge, because that's going to be you want your story to revolve around that subject. And then, yeah, that's pretty much it, right? Just keep repeating this process. Keep holding intention while also telling a story. When you feel your mind entering a transcendental state, you want to stop focusing on holding the intention and then sort of allow your mind to drift into the transcendental state or drift into a daydream-like state. And then in your daydream-like state, you want to switch to now trying to control everything or just feel more emotion, but control your belief, your imagination, control everything using subconscious instinct, right, or your positive mind. And that's going to have a very just doing it kind of feel to it, which is also how your dreams feel. And then when you fall out of a transcendental state, repeat the process and just keep doing it. And as you do this, you're going to notice that your subconscious is charging more and more and more. Now, there is one other thing, that's important, which we're going to talk about in the next video, but I want to just keep this video to the main technique, because in this case, you're going to now start charging in the face of negative memory, or negative memory that's at full power. And that's a little difficult. That could be a little tricky. It's not like pre-charging where there was a subconscious entropy dead zone, right? So this one you're going to charge in the face of negative memory, so it's a little harder. But there's another property to negative memory that relates to the main charging technique that we're going to talk about in the next video, which makes it a little easier. And there's more to talk about this, but we're going to talk about those principles in the next chapter. Because there are even other variables to this that I haven't told you about yet, which makes this technique even stronger. But this is the basic technique. We pretty much already went over this part here, which is just to avoid the temptation when you're in a transcendental state of using your negative mind to do everything because you have more control with it. Because if you do that, you're just going to get knocked out of a transcendental state and you won't be charging. But this last point of the main charging technique is to avoid forcefully holding an intention, or holding an intention with a lot of intensity and effort, because that's just going to give you a headache, right? The subconscious, you don't need to hold an intention like harder, like you're straining your brain. That doesn't do anything, right? That's a very negative-minded expression of thought. It hasn't, in my experience, it really has nothing to do with the subconscious. Holding an intention really hard or very intensely doesn't do anything to make the subconscious charge more. I don't even think it makes it respond more. So you don't want to put a lot of force into it. That just has nothing to do with anything. All you need to do is hold an intention very lightly and softly, so you don't strain your brain. You hold it lightly and softly, and then that's it. That's all you need to do, right? Your subconscious is going to be one that's going to do all the work, not the conscious mind, right? So when you hold intention very hard and strain in a straining way, that's your conscious mind, and that strains your brain, and it's going to, like I said, it's going to give you a headache. You don't want to do that. I used to do that sometimes, and it used to give me a headache, right? And then I learned to stop. It doesn't, like I said, it doesn't give me any advantage. That's what I noticed from that. There is something. Well, no, we're going to talk more about it in chapter 12. I call it the burst action, which is important to charging, but we don't need to talk about that right now. But yeah, for now, just avoid forcefully holding intention. Just do it very softly, very lightly, or stop. Avoid forcefully holding it. Do it very softly and lightly, and just practice it and get the hang of it. Right? As you practice it more and more, you're going to get better at it, and you're going to be able to do it smoother and nicer, right? Yeah, that's pretty much it. Like I said, because we pretty much went over all the theory, right, in the last 10 chapters, right, in some of this chapter. This process should be very simple now, relatively easy. It just takes a little practice, especially with the switching part, because that's like the hardest part to explain. But yeah, once you get the hang of it, then yeah, you can start charging your subconscious. Like I said, right now, this is the technique mainly for charging emotion, right? So you can charge belief, creativity, transcendental control using the same technique, but usually you're going to use it, you're not going to charge your subconscious in a way that makes, I don't want to word it, the energy of your subconscious. In this case, when you're charging emotion, you basically want the energy of your subconscious or a positive memory to just become really, 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 really intense. But intensity doesn't give you performance, right? So usually with transcendental creativity, you want to have it for performance. You want to perform in some activity in some way, right? Or if you want to have a belief, let's say you want to charge confidence, right? It's very easy to charge confidence to a very intense level, but not be able to really perform well as a confident person. We'll talk more about that in chapter 13. But suffice it to say, charging it for the purpose of performance is completely different. It's much more involved. But yeah, that's it for now. In the next video, we're going to talk about, I think I talked about it a little bit, I think in the last video or the video before, but we're going to talk a little bit about the intermittent nature of the subconscious mind, because that's very important to the main charging technique too, right? So yeah, that's pretty much it for now, but thanks for watching, and I'll see you next video.